evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever time it is, and welcome back to another episode of I Want to Be Your Canary, a Final Fantasy podcast. Today, or tonight, or this morning, whatever you're listening, you are going to be with me and my good friend Scooter. Say hello, Scooter.
Hello, Scooter.
As we take you down a journey of fun and philosophy as to do with Canon and Final Fantasy. I'm pretty excited about this one, and like we've talked before, Scooter, I think that this is something that you and I are going to be really getting into.
Well, it's going to be a deep dive of sorts, and it is going to be more philosophical, not fact-checking all of these, but it should be a good debate. I'm excited for it.
Yes, a good debate. If you're looking for a good deep dive, I think, a good deep dive into what is canon, how it is affected by games moving forward, all that kind of good stuff. So first off, though, let's just celebrate a little bit. I'm just kind of looking at some of our statistics right here, and we're getting pretty close to 3,000 streams. Yeah, and it's awesome. And we just really appreciate everybody listening. And if you are on Twitter, you can follow us at Canary Podcast. And a couple of people that we just wanted to shout out, and there's many that we could.
Hi, Mom.
Just some people. So, yeah. Hi, Mom. Hi, wife. People who are interacting with us on social platforms, which is really cool. It's something that I really feel like it makes our art really feel appreciated. Mm-hmm. So Oshin, Ode to the RPG, Darth Wilco 82, Ray O'Donnell, Alvin, Black Two Sugars. This is just a couple of accounts that are people who are communicating with us and having dialogue, are giving us good feedback and have expressed appreciation in our show. So we just want to start off by saying, hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. There's a lot of other people who have given us support that's not in the online world and who have not been mentioned. And we appreciate that support too. But
all the workers out there, we appreciate you.
Love you. So.
No, yeah, it's awesome to see people, actually take time out and respond to us. It's a lot of fun.
It is. Yeah. Every time I see somebody at me on my phone, I'm just like, oh yes, yes. And when I say me, I don't mean like my personal one, but our account, because I'm running it. But whenever I see that, I just get really stoked. Oh yeah. Get to people excited about our show, and I get excited about putting them out. We love doing this, so it's good stuff.
It's fun. Let's keep it going.
That is true. Let's keep it going. All right. So the first thing is this is kind of like a two-parter in the sense that we're going to have another show that is going to be our next show that is going to really benefit from having the discussion on canon. The next show that we're going to do is we're going to see how many worlds that we can connect in Final Fantasy. And I have done a lot of research and I can connect them pretty good.
That's going to be a really interesting one too.
Oh, I am really excited about that one. That is something that I've been writing about for a hot second here. And it was actually the conspiracy show that Ross did when we did that, which we got to get back to that because that was so cool. Mm-hmm. It was that made me think, wow, you know what? As I'm going over my head, I'm thinking there's a lot of connections here.
There's some really scary good connections. You know what I mean? The coincidence is just too good. So yeah, it'll be fun to talk about that one.
The coincidences are tough to ignore, but that kind of brings us back to this show. There's a lot of ways that you could connect some of those games, but there's also an idea of canon out there, a Final Fantasy canon. What is true Final Fantasy canon? And do you just want to give us like just a real brief definition or explanation of what
Yes.
canon is?
I mean, so I don't have my Webster's dictionary in front of me right this moment, but from my understanding, when people talk about canon in video games or books or movie or TV series and stuff like that, it's trying to figure out what is what they call official canon, official storyline, official names, places. What is actually not just kind of fluffed in on the side, I guess, because fanfic and all that stuff. We're talking about what is really in these stories, what the developers, what the makers of the games wanted in these stories and wanted us to get out of them. Canon, and basically is just what is official in the story, game, movie, or whatever. So,
and I have the definition here of canon.
Okay, good. Oh, good. Because that was a rough one.
No, I think you did a fine job. Two definitions right off the top: a general law, rule, principle, or criterion by which something is judged, and also a collection of lists or sacred books accepted as genuine. And I think that's the big point right there is accepted as genuine.
Right. So, okay, for instance, a good example of this might be with The Witcher coming out on Netflix, and everybody's probably or may have heard of that or played the game before. That game is based off of a series of books that the author had written, in the 90s or 80s, I forget when. But that, everybody considers those books official canon. They're not outside the storyline. They really are the storyline, and they push the game and the movie forward. And so you can kind of use those books as an official stage setup, if you will. I don't know. It's you can believe what you read in them, I guess.
Yeah, and that combats the fanfic that you talk about. There's a lot of Harry Potter fan fiction out there. There's a lot of fan fiction for tons of different stuff. But, just because somebody out there writes something that's like, oh, well, Harry Potter is actually, 6'6". It doesn't, that's not canon because, somebody thought that'd be cool.
And in this series, I guess when we're talking about canon, we're really talking about, there's so many entries in this series, and some of them are kind of spin-offs and a little bit outside what you might consider official canon for one of them. But, we'll get into that.
And that's the cool part of the show, because I don't really know that there is, I'm sure that if we went to Square and said, listen, we need to know what's canon and what's not. The security guards probably be like, get out of here, you nerds. But if we were able to talk to somebody, they may be able to say, well, you know what, XYZ, this is kind of what we think. There also might not be an official definition of what canon is. They just, I don't know, maybe just don't care that much to be.
And some makers of some series, they kind of leave it up to interpretation for the audience to decide. And, that can be half the fun.
And that's why I'm excited to do this show, because I think that there is a lot of questions out there as to what qualifies as Final Fantasy canon. So,
all right, so shoot, what's your first one?
Well, I think that it's easy enough to say that anything in the main series is going to be, any numbered one is going to be autocanon. I mean, it's tough to argue that the main series ones are not going to be canon.
The numbered ones, Final Fantasy 1, 2, is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I think that is as absolute of canon as we can probably get.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I would say so. In what we're talking about, Final Fantasy, the series, they didn't have any books or magazines or movies or anything that these were based off, right? These were the games were the entirety of it. So, yeah, I'd agree with that for sure.
Now, with that, with the numbered series being this is the part where it starts to kind of get a little bit funky. Is some of these games have been remade onto later platforms, and there are things that have been changed a little bit. There are things that have been manipulated a little, and just small things. Small things.
Little bits of dialogue here and there, or an item change in the inventory, or a name change for a place sometimes, or
And so when I take a look at that, that's where my first question is when does something start straying from canon? Can you make something or state something after the fact, and does that become canon?
Right. So, for instance, if one of these games came out, they had a remake and they changed the name of one of the main characters or something, is that main canon, or is that considered canon?
Yes.
Honestly, my gut just says you got to go with the OG. You got to go with the original. Whatever came first, that's, even if it was wrong, in some translations or something. That's what I would say. But I could see how if they, the makers really didn't intend for something to be named that, or an item to be in the game, or whatever it is, and they changed it in the remake, then maybe, I don't know, what do you do? Do you set that remake as a separate, entirely separate entry of it on, or in of itself, or do you just kind of set it aside and say, well, that one doesn't count because it's not the original?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So one of the things that got me really thinking about this when I was first kind of looking through, I have one of those Final Fantasy, just like nerd encyclopedias pretty much. And it does like a connection of characters. And in Final Fantasy II, the one that was released on the Famicom, excuse me, I'm looking at it right now, and there's the last Dragoon, Ricard, and he has a son, and the son is named Cain. All right. So Cain.
Is it spelled the same way?
Spelled the same way. Now, Cain, is a Dragoon from Final Fantasy IV, or Final Fantasy II in America. Now, Cain's name was added to the Final Fantasy II in the
American
GBA version of the game, in the Game Boy Advance version of the game. Yeah. So now that's if you're looking at coincidence or continuity,
right?
That kind of makes it. That's going to make a difference because that's an easy connection.
You can easily point that that's his son, and he continues in this game, and and then maybe we could start connecting more of the storylines from those two games.
I have a connection that relies pretty heavily on connecting 2 and 4, because if you're able to connect Ricard to Cain, then obviously they're in the same world.
Same world, right?
So, but you see how that can be difficult when something is changed after the fact. Did somebody? Because there's two scenarios here. There is when they created 2, they said, "Oh, okay, here's Ricard, and he has this son. His son's name's really inconsequential to the storyline, so we're not maybe going to identify it." Final Fantasy IV, they say, "Oh yeah, well this is Ricard's son from Final Fantasy II," but we find out about that way after the fact, and it makes me go, okay, well did they say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had Cain be Ricard's son from number 2? Wouldn't that be kind of a cool coincidence people would be able to point to? But you're doing it after the fact, so it's either they didn't find it important enough to add in the first game, and it was always Cain. Or they said, hey, you know what we should do? We should make Cain from 4. We should make that Ricard's son from 2. Wouldn't that be cool?
See if anybody notices and connects the dots.
Yes.
And maybe, it was a breadcrumb trail that they're kind of leaving for us. And that's fun. I think that's what that is it's another form of entertainment for all of us nerds out there that play these games enough to notice stuff like that and go back and go, that's fishy, you know?
Right.
So it could be that they're just kind of, giving us more fun things to think about, or yeah, like you said, they may have just forgot to add the name in the original.
Which then drives
tough.
us nuts.
Yeah. Huh. That's a good one.
Now that brings me to just kind of the larger overall question of if something is added, something small like that, and you kind of touched on this, I feel, if something's added to like a later version that changes or adds clarity to an earlier game, to an original game, can we count that as official Final Fantasy canon? Because presumably it's made by the same. It's going to be made by Square. It's going to be the rendered, and it's going to
right. Yeah, I mean, Well, okay, I'll throw it back at you. What do you think on that one?
See, I'm kind of I don't even know if old school's a word in this, if that's even an appropriate term for this, but
stubbornness. That's
what it is. Yeah, it is. I'm stubborn to accept something changed after the fact, and which is tough because, like I said, I have a part of the show next week is predicated on that connection right there that I just said. But I also don't want it to be manufactured. I want the connections to be organic. I don't want it to be some contrived, forced thing that people go and that Square says, "Oh, wouldn't that be cool if we did this?" I don't know, because then I feel like it throws in more questions into timelines and canon. It's
Sure.
like, well, you're telling me what the difference between Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 4 is a generation? Is 10, 15 years? That's how long it took the world to get that messed up again, and to utterly change.
Right, and I mean, in a lot of ways, but yeah, I think what is going to be interesting to see, not to move away from that, but I think with 7 Remake especially, we're going to see what Square thinks is canon, and how they're going to approach it, because I bet you and they've already talked about adding storyline to it, so it's going to change.
It really is.
Okay, but here's the thing, though. Yeah, it's going to change, but you did hear that they said most of the additional storyline is stuff that they weren't able to add originally. They had already planned it. They just had to cut it, like cutting floor stuff, right? Or cutting room floor stuff. But so now is that official canon?
Let's talk about 7 Remake in its own specialty, because I think that
Sure.
that, because I have that down here as its own thing, because I think that's a whole conversation in itself.
Yeah. Oh, it will be once it comes out too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But bouncing back to the, that point, excuse me, of, are those changes after the fact, made, if it says, if the producer of the game says, or director of the game, the writer says, well, yeah, that's, I'm making that call now. I wrote both games, but I'm making that call after the fact. Is that a fair canon to add? The official dude says it, right? And I'm not saying that somebody has come out and said, "Oh yes, the Cain and Ricard are linked."
Yeah.
But what do you think? Is it?
I would say yes, it is, because the going back to the definition of it, it is by definition. If it's the official person, releasing it, writing it, producing it, whatever, that's how it's got to go. It's got to be according to them, the authority, if you will. There has to be the buck stops here with somewhere with that, right? So it's got to be with the maker, in my mind. Again, like I said, though, it's hard when you're going back and changing stuff, because it feels weird.
Now that's going to make me ask this question. If you say something, can you unsay it? Because if they've
in what
made,
regard?
well, if you've made this certain storyline, or if you've made your bed and now you have to lay in it kind of thing, you've created these connections, or you've done something in the past that you do want to change. I guess a way to look at it is, if something happens in an original game and somebody wants to go back and change it and says, well, that's how I originally intended it. Is that illegitimate? Can you say something and then after the fact go back and say, oh, well, I actually didn't mean to say that, and so it's not counted? Because I'm the creator, because I'm the person who makes it, I'm telling you that what was canon no longer is. Is that fair?
I mean, I don't know if asking if it's fair is the right question, though. I think you got to approach it differently, because fairness doesn't have anything to do with it. It's whatever is considered official, right? So
I guess, can something be, if something is official in 1991, and then somebody goes in a new game, let's say not a new game, but a game that gets ported to something else in 2001, can somebody say, okay, yes, in 1991, that was canon then, but now I'm changing it after the fact, and now this new piece is canon because I say so.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but again, I don't think that. I think it is. But again, if we're going against the definition of it, I think yes, it is official canon because the official person says it's official. You know what I mean?
So back to the definition: a collection of or list of sacred books accepted as genuine. The other one is a general rule, law, principle, or criterion by which something is judged. So we have two words: judged and accepted. And
right now, the first one. Okay, now when you read those back to me, the first one sounds community driven.
It does, very much so.
Right.
Yeah. What is biblical canon? Right. What books are canon? Different. Different. If you are Mormon, you accept Book of Mormon as canon. If you are not, then you don't. So
right.
It is. It's
got to be a group accepted one. So then the other definition you're saying is law, or say that again, please.
A general law, rule, principle, or criterion by which something is judged.
A general law, rule, or criteria. So I guess, it again is, you kind of got to set your boundaries. You know what I mean? That's what it sounds like to me, is that you have to decide what your boundaries are for canon yourself. I guess if we're not talking about an official person, because I didn't hear anything about that in those definitions, I guess I was messing it up in my head. Then, it's community accepted. So, what's official?
But you also have to remember that the law, rule, or principle or criterion, that is set by somebody. Somebody makes a law. Somebody makes a rule.
So but I mean, is that somebody in our case? Now that we're talking about Final Fantasies, is that Square Enix, or is that you kind of got to scope it? Is it the writer, the production team, or Square Enix themselves, or you know what I mean? Like,
Does that lend itself to potential, Mob Rule says that, we all accept that, that Phoenix isn't a bird at all. It's it's a peacock, which is a bird.
It might be, it might be down to, and this might sound bad, but kind of whatever the largest community voice is, whatever is most accepted by the masses is official canon, if you will, then. I don't know where we could point to.
I think it's got to be somewhere in between.
It could be. I mean, well, yeah. Because if it's a judgment thing, then like you're saying, it's subjective. So then we got to decide for ourselves. But
there's got to be somewhere in between, and I think it's the balance of power between the audience and the creators, because I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that you can say something and then go back and unsay it because maybe you didn't like it, maybe it was unpopular, something to that regard, to try and fix it after the fact. But I also think that as the creator, you do have a lot of say of, yeah, this is the official thing right here. This is, this is the dude's middle name, and no one else can really change that, or whatever it might be. But I think that there's got to be somewhere in between. I think that the audience has to hold the creators accountable and maintain the integrity of the original storyline, and you can't change something after the fact because it's unpopular, because it fits another narrative, because you don't like it, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. But as a game maker, I wouldn't care.
Sure.
And that's terrible to say, but if I try to put myself in their shoes, and you're getting all these letters from people saying, well, this isn't how it was, and this isn't exactly the word for word, or this isn't his real name.
Beat it, nerds.
Yeah, no, that's what my mind just says, is like, I just don't care. I'm making it how I want to. This is my game. But I mean, when you're talking these, this series especially, or this size of a game, this popular of a game, it would be hard to not listen to the communities. It's because there's so many people out there that love this stuff. So,
and I've talked about this on a previous episode. I remember a prime example of somebody who has caught flack for this is J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter series.
Now, remind me what happened, because I'm not a Harry Potterer. What happened with that one?
There was an instance where I think that on a Broadway show coming up, and the details of this are sketchy, but you're going to understand the point. Hermione has been cast by a black actress, and a bunch of people, of course.
Oh, so it's the whole Hamilton kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess just like people getting upset about it, and well, she wasn't black in the books, which who cares ultimately, but if she's black, white, or Indian, or Asian, or whatever, but J.K. Rowling then backtracked and said, "Oh yeah, you know what? I love Black Hermione," and I kind of tried to push this narrative of her being black in the books, and then a lot of people jumped on her saying, "Well, in the books it says that, in this line it says that, her white face and da 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 da." So, like I said, whether she is whatever race is not the point of the conversation. It's are you changing that after the fact to try and make your characters seem more diverse?
Well, who is she responding to?
Like,
I mean, was
fans.
Was it a little black girl asking, is there a black Hermione?
No, I don't know.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Because isn't J.K. Rowling, like, it's a children's book, right? Ultimately. Yeah. So she's, I mean, just in my mind, when I heard that story from you just now, it sounds like what she's doing, the J.K. person, is trying to mommy up or daddy up, and no, everybody gets a chance, kid.
Sure,
kind of. And then maybe the backlash happened from the community because we're just nerds. But I don't know the context. I guess ultimately, if she was just trying to give a boost to everybody out there, or if it's she really was retroactively changing a character. If it was the latter, that's I mean, how many movies and books came out and then right at the end she changed it? Did this happen late in the series, or when did it happen?
This was like in the last 6 months.
Oh, okay. So then all those books have already come out and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. And all the movies have already come out, obviously. And
well, I mean, she's the only writer.
Yes.
Yeah, they're her book. If she wants to change it, she can, but then she's got to go reprint all of them.
Now,
I think she's got enough money to do that.
Yeah. Oh man. She's doing quite well for herself.
Yeah, she can change it to whatever she wants, but yeah.
Now, yeah, and you're right. Absolutely. There's no question that J.K. Rowling has the power to make whatever character she wants. She can change anything that she wants. People aren't going to like it because people are, kind of like, well, this is how I saw it and this is how I understand it and this is how I want it to be. And to a degree, like I said, I feel like I probably fall into that trap with Final Fantasy where it's like, okay, these are the things that I know and this is how I accepted it. And now if somebody's trying to change it after the fact, if somebody's trying to make Cain be the son of Ricard because it's cool,
then that
cool connection.
messes my whole brain up of, what I thought about the games originally and now how I feel about them. And I get it.
Yeah. So that's just, that whole question of changing something retroactively, if that can be accepted as, official canon, even if it's done by somebody somebody who's officially doing it, it's tricky if you're doing something for a wrong reason. And I'm not saying that J.K. Rowling did something for the wrong reason, but if somebody were to say, well, I don't like what this person said in this other game because maybe it doesn't fit with the norms and mores of our society now. So I'm actually going to change it, or I'm going to change this aspect because now it fits more socially today.
Now that, I think again, it has to go, you got to question what their motive is. That's why I was asking about that Harry Potter one is was she, responding to a specific kid asking about it, or was it a more just I want to do this because it's going to create drama and people will buy more books and I'm going to be rich, or what was the reason? Maybe there was no intent one way or the other and it was just an oopsie. And
I think it probably was like, hey, you know what? I can make Hermione black if I want. I can make her an alien. I could make her, whatever. Yeah. I could give her 3 hands because it's my book and I can do what I want. And for people who are going to be upset about this diversity inclusion, you know what?
Tough
too
cookies.
Bad. And it's my book and I can do whatever I want. And if you don't like it, then you know what? Don't read my books,
Yeah, I mean, but really, then I don't have a problem with that. I think, again, though, like you're saying, is what is canon and the judgment of the community. I think the community would have a problem accepting that stuff, though. Anyway, back to Final Fantasy stuff. That is a really good comparison, though.
Yeah. That just leaves me riddled as to, oh man, it kind of like shakes up my world. Like, can somebody retroactively, do that? And most people don't care because it's like, well, whatever. But here in Final Fantasy world, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, geez, some of these have been around for our whole lives that we've been playing, and so to see it change is it throws us off a little bit. But
the outside of the numbered games, when we start talking about Tactics, when we start talking about Crystal Chronicles, when we start talking about things that aren't numbered series ones, does that I start wondering about canon there too? Or when you see Final Fantasy characters in other games, Kingdom Hearts or fighting games, or stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. No, yeah. When you play, or the first time I played Kingdom Hearts, I remember seeing Squall in there, and I'm just going,
hello.
What? Why are you in the Disney World? It was weird. Did not know how to feel about that, and in all honesty, no, that one in my mind is nothing. It's just all that is a cash grab in my mind. Sorry, but it is.
So we can't. We are not to assume that Donald Duck and Goofy and Squall and
you can
Sora
if you want to
know each other.
If you want to, because technically they do in that world. So
in that world, but I'm saying in the canon aspect of it, is that what
I mean? Someone might argue the other side of that. So okay, to devil's advocate that, then would that put the Kingdom Hearts realm in Final Fantasy worlds?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Oish.
And that's
getting. You're getting a lot of 7 layers of Kevin Bacon going here.
boy howdy. Yeah, because there are a lot of different worlds, but I don't know. I'd have to do a little bit more exploration to see how those Final Fantasy characters ended up in a world, because in those Final Fantasy games, you sure do not see Mickey Mouse ever.
No, not even mentioned.
No.
No.
So yeah, I don't know, stuff like that. I don't really spin-offs and after the fact stuff. Now tactics, I do consider canon, and that's might just because I'm being stingy and I love tactics, but I guess that could really be up for debate. Cloud ends up in that game. It ends up in tactics, and I've always seen tactics as the game that's not chronologically in the Final Fantasy series, but should be.
And I would not disagree with that. I feel like, I honestly don't remember if I completed the whole game, but after playing just 20, 40 hours into it, the story, the realm that it's set in, the setting, the style of the game, it feels like you're the warriors of light and you must save the world. It feels Final Fantasy.
Yep.
And I think we did talk a bit about this. Probably one of the main reasons why they didn't number it is because, I don't know the timing on the release of it, but the combat is just so different. And it's tactical based combat, and that's why it's called tactics. Because you know what I bet, Colin, though, if they did number that one, it would have been such a dramatic shift from the turn-based system that we're used to in the meat of the game that it might have been really not well received, by the community. But now as far as canon, do you have any connections with tactics from other games?
Yeah, which I'm not going to delve into them too much.
Okay, but interesting.
There definitely are a couple. That actually connect. The main connection has to do with the original Final Fantasy. So
interesting. Okay, well, we've got to save that for next show. But now let me continue off of a few of these though. I think number 8 had a little pocket game, if I'm not mistaken. I never played it because you had to buy a peripheral to play it, but you could go around raising and caring for your chocobo. Is that canon? Kinda, but and then what about 10-2 or 10
or 13-2 and 3?
Didn't that one have? Yeah, that came out with a couple of spinoffs too. Are those because so 10-2 I did play, and I got to the end because I wanted to see that ending because everybody said it was just such they said get to the ending, and it's one of those endings where you're like wait, I get to decide how this ends, and that's a tough one. I would say it's canon though.
Yeah, there are some aspects certainly of 10-2 where you go, okay, weird, but there are certainly connections that 10-2 makes to other canon chronological games that make me think, okay, well, maybe it is a little bit more than I thought. It's such a weird, like,
it's a weird game.
Yeah, it's like Yuna
overall
is this summoner,
star power. Like she got popular, and now she's a rock concert person,
and now she's like
still saving the world.
Got a couple of guns traded in the staff for a couple of pistols.
It's just other stuff besides that,
so
but
peculiar. It's just a weird shift.
It was a very weird. I mean, we could talk about why Square did it, but that's for something else, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as canon, I would say that those the 10-2 13 whatever editions. I think you have to consider those to be canon.
Yeah.
Because it would be like in a book series, it would be, The Adventures of Jimmy, and then The Adventures of Jimmy 2. Yeah, I would.
Now, talking about things that spin off of canon, obviously, and we're getting closer to that Final Fantasy, talking about Final Fantasy Remake, but before we do, we see things like Advent Children. That's a different type of media, which I don't know if you could put into the same line of like, well, what if, Final Fantasy books that they have written, which I'm pretty sure that the's a couple out there.
I don't know, honestly.
But let's talk about Advent Children.
Sure. I've seen it.
Does that count as canon? I mean, it's
that's tough
because it's different media platform, but it obviously has directly to do with Final Fantasy VII.
A lot of the same characters are in it. A lot of the same, towns and everything that you see in the world of 7. But it's so much more fleshed out in that movie because the technology of the graphics and everything are just so much better than they were on the PlayStation 1. I don't know. What's the title of it, I guess? Does it say Final Fantasy VII Advent Children? Or is it called Advent Children?
Let's take a quick look here. I don't know if it's called
not to send you on a search tree, but and that right out of the gate, at least for me, kind of would steer my gut in the direction. If it's Final Fantasy VII,
Final Fantasy VII Advent Children.
Advent Children. Okay, then I guess I would. Even though, gosh, the antagonist of that is just so weird. I mean, it's very, Japanese kind of corny weird, but
now the director of it is Tetsuya Nomura, who is like
big name.
He's a big name in Final Fantasies. He has directed a lot of Final Fantasies, so he obviously it wasn't like some side project.
No, and you could tell that. I mean, just by how it played out in a storyline. But would I expect to see those characters that have been introduced in Advent Children in the remake? Probably not. It would be cool if some of them did, but I'd be okay if they didn't too.
Sure.
I mean,
he's a character designer for a lot of the Final Fantasies. So.
Yeah. What would your gut tell you though on that one? Is that in your mind or your eyes, considered canon for 7?
That's just such a tough question because there's another element that's added into the Genova and Sephiroth and those like goons that Cloud is constantly fighting off who recognize Genova as mother as well, and you don't see that in 7 at all. Now, was that, like you said earlier, was that cutting floor stuff?
Yeah. Was that another example of a storyline that they never got to add in the original 7?
Yeah.
Did they just have so much writing material that they could make a movie, they could make Crisis Core, they could make a remake, with extra storylines? Like, if there really was that much writing material, that would be cool. It's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
But, maybe the writers are even nerdier than us, Colin, if that can be a thing. And they are just sitting there day and night just writing stories, just writing, and all these papers and pages just fall on the floor and they don't care, but, making a movie and another game on it, I guess. I don't know. I mean...
And maybe some of those questions will get answered in the 7 remake, which this is a perfect segue into that, is the 7 remake, are any changes that have been made in the 7 remake, anything that's retroactively changed?
Right. Okay. So a scene that we all recognize, if that has changed in this game, is that official canon now? Yeah. I guess, another question to ask is, can you change canon?
That's what I'm saying with the can I unsay something I've already said?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think we did talk a bit about that, but
it comes down to intent, I think, is what you said, or it has to do with the reason that you do it. Is the reason that you are changing the canon, or that the canon is being changed, is it because you didn't have the storage capacity for it to make the main game? Or was it because you're trying to change it after the fact in order to fit a different narrative that is now more socially acceptable, or something that now you want to more pursue? So it has to do with the intent of the writer, and that's something that we don't know.
Yeah, no, so, I mean, when we get to see, our first cutscene or our first familiar scene in number 7 remake, it'll start answering a lot of these questions.
And it's going to create a lot more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, geez, yeah. It'll be interesting to go and play the original again after you play the remake and see really what they did change in it and stuff. I'm sure people will be doing that very quickly.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead and ask me again about... ask me that question again, though.
I forgot even what question it was. Does Final Fantasy VII Remake is the canon that's changed, or if canon gets changed,
right?
Do we accept that, or do we go, oh, come on?
Man, because it could go real south if certain things do change. It will. God, it's gonna be tough for them to change stuff in that one. Because that's such an ingrained one for all of us, Mm-hmm. It's that would be like, what's a good analogy? I don't even know. That would be like changing an episode of The Office where, I don't know what they would do, but if Jim was now John or something like that, that show is loved by a lot of people, and to change even a little thing in that one, might be a big deal for them.
That's like, obviously one of the biggest things when it has to do with canon, biblical references. Oh, well, David did not deny Christ 3 times by the time Christ said that he would. He only did it 2 times. Like that obviously changes it that changes so much. Or Judas doesn't give up Christ to the Romans. It doesn't, get his silver.
Right.
And that changes so much moving forward, because you're like, oh my gosh, that is such a central part and such an important part of this story. And now it's not that. So how can everything that goes after it, how can we accept that, knowing this new truth, or knowing what we've been told is this new truth? And that's, I think, the tough thing that ultimately we struggle with, is how can we accept that now, knowing what's been told to us that's changed before?
Yeah, with an open mind.
Yeah. Don't get hung up on it.
I mean, well, I don't think that's, but I don't think that's really the advice. I guess you could say that. I guess you could say, just don't care so much about it. But we do, because, we enjoy it so much.
Yep.
And there's not really much that's going to change that. But I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to decide if you're going to have fun with it or not, because if it does change and you're not enjoying it, well, then, you're not going to enjoy the game. And what's the point of these games?
Sure.
Have fun.
Yep.
So.
We made podcasts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for us. But, with the biblical references or for other holy scripts or things like that, that's societal changes. That's belief changes. That's really hardcore stuff. So,
I mean, Final Fantasy's not a religion to you?
No, I really don't believe in it. Sorry. But, yeah, it's... I think we can take it a little more lightheartedly,
Sure. It's good. It's good talking points, is what it is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, geez, I wish I had more, good examples for you of what might not be or what is canon. I'm just trying to think, because there's a lot in these games.
Yeah, and there's small things, and then there's potentially bigger aspects of it. And I think I'm going to go back to this because I think you made a really good point. Is the intent of something being changed? We planned on it being that way, but just didn't happen. So
for whatever reason, and in my gut, like I said, it feels like if that's the case, then you kind of got to go with them, because that's what they wanted us to experience originally.
So,
yeah.
Like I said, I think it's somewhere in between the audience holding creators, producers, directors accountable for things that they've done in the past and not allowing those things to be changed because of bad intent. Upholding the integrity of your work, not changing something after the fact because you didn't like the way that it looked or sounded or how it's resonating with you or resonating with people today. It's like you made your bed, now you got to lay in it, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think that canon is, I don't know if I hesitate to say fluid, but I think that there is a fluidity about it.
Yeah, I think you need to allow for it a little bit,
especially in something like this.
Well, especially in a remake. Yeah, if we're still talking on that note, but going back and talking maybe not about a remake, but a remaster. When you start changing stuff in a remaster, like, come on, leave it as it is. Just upgrade the graphics and give me a better menu.
Exactly.
Leave everything as it is.
Exactly. So now I think that's that. That being said, let's talk about our next episode when we're talking about coincidences or connections. We're gonna connect a lot of these worlds. There's going to be a question of canon, though. Just say, well, is it fair to connect these worlds based on this? And I think that one of the ways that it's fair to connect those worlds to say, okay, how does this uphold in the canon? Can this be supported by something that is? Because I feel like if you're supporting it via canon, it's like you're using just a good source to do it. So that's why I wanted to start with this episode, to establish what do we think canon is. And that's not really going to affect, necessarily. It's going to add questions to when we're making those connections or coincidences with these worlds. But ultimately, I'm going to make all of these connections, and then we can discuss the validity of it.
Right. So, yeah, just to kind of recap then on my end, I think I would agree that this numbered series, as far as story and stuff goes, that's got to be, official canon. The second in those series, 10-2, 13-2, or whatever, I also would include those. The little spinoffs, that's where I get gray. Advent Children, a little bit gray, but I guess I still would. I feel like that's where you're saying the fluidity kind of might come in. That's where I feel like myself is landing. I think you and Ross will have some, and we'll have to ask him what his thoughts are real quick when we do the next show. But that's kind of where I feel like myself lands is give me the official ones. I'll agree with those. If you're doing weird books and stuff, gonna have a harder time. But keep the remasters. The remake, I think we gotta. It's gonna have to leave an open mind. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about it, but I'm gonna just try and go with it open and just, if it's a new game, it's a new game, But
I think to best describe Canon for me and how I see it is can be summed up by using the United States Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart to describe a case where he was having a tough time describing something, but it's famously said, well, I'll know it when I see it. And that's kind of how I feel with it. It's tough to describe, but I'll know it when I see it. So that is...
No. And I mean, and like I said, when you feel it and it feels right and real, but then Colin, you also, and this is just the other side of that, of course, is you do need to be, some things will make you uncomfortable even though they are true,
Yep. Can't pick and choose.
And that's always hard. Yeah, it's always hard. But that's the thing with this is it's a judgment piece. So, hey.
Love it.
We can argue about it.
And that's the fun of it. So,
yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a nice little debate. Man, I can't believe an hour flew by when we were doing that.
It really did,
Holy
didn't it?
Smokes. That is wild. So, all right. Well, next time you hear, we'll hopefully have Ross back on stage with us. And as always, Scooter and I will be here ready to talk about connections or coincidences linking Final Fantasy worlds. And let me tell you, just as a little bit of a tease, there are a lot of Final Fantasies that you can connect in the same world.
And speaking off mic with you guys a little bit about this, it is going to be a fun one.
It is.
I think it's going to be just a good old nerdy deep dive of whoa.
And this is the ultimate. Like, you made your bed, now you got to lay in it, because when you did the small things that they did that showed coincidences or connections in different Final Fantasy games, to just link them in just the easiest, smallest way, that's something that we jump on and go, wait a second, if this was here and this was here, then it kind of shows that there's some sort of connection there. And when they might go, you know what, you might back off on this, it's like, well, that's kind of undeniable. You've kind of made your bed. You've kind of said this. You can't really unsay it after the fact. So...
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. So that'll be
a fun one.
All right. Well, final parting words.
I had something ready for this part of the show, and I just don't anymore. I'm going to say hi, Mom, and everybody out there. Thanks for listening. Thanks,
Beautiful.
Colin.
Thank you. And again, at Canary Podcast, please get at us.
That was it.
Do it.
No. It was just to remind everybody that, we do have a Twitter. It's at Canary Podcast. We are working on getting our shows up on YouTube and adding video with these hopefully soon. We'll be working on that here over the summer. But we're re-uploading all of our old shows to YouTube. So if you guys are more onto YouTube, so you can watch them there. We're on Spotify. We're on Castbox. We're on a bunch of podcast platforms. Still working on iTunes.
Yep.
That's a tough one to get on.
We'll get there.
And
working on some apparel.
That was the other thing. Might get some T-shirts out here soon with the old Canary logo on it, so that would be pretty fun.
That'll be awesome.
Yes. So that was it. That was what I wanted to say.
Nailed it. So, all right. Well, then that being said, Scooter, it's been real.
It's been fun.
It's been real fun. Thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to delivering another show here before too long. Have a fantastic morning, night, evening, whatever it is that you're doing. Have a good one.